I want to just welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today. This is the fifth webinar in MIPIN's year-long series on emerging Midwest invasives. We are recording this webinar and that will be posted to MIPIN's YouTube channel. If you've missed any of our previous webinars, the webpage where you registered for this event, you can go back and view any of those. My name is Michelle Blasker. I'm the coordinator for the Midwest Invasive Plant Network. Today we're going to be talking about water soldier. And I'm really excited to share that. Oops. Having a little issue with my screen again. Oh, there we go. It's a little delayed for some reason. Okay, so I want to just extend our thanks to the Invasive Species Center. They are sponsoring this webinar. If you're not familiar with the center, they work to prevent the introduction and spread of high-risk invasive species in Canada by connecting stakeholders with knowledge and technology. If you haven't visited their website yet, it's a great resource for invasive species profiles, detailed information on common weeds and pests, and they have monthly webinar series and events which highlight new tools and projects that they're involved in. And if you go to their website, you can keep up to date with their activities by signing up for their newsletter or joining their news feed. Before I formally introduce our guest speaker today, I want to give you a quick introduction to MIPIN and just some context for how this series was developed. MIPIN was formed in 2006, and our role is to coordinate invasive species outreach and activities across the Midwest. And our mission is to reduce the impact of invasive plants in this region. And when I say this region, I mean the 9 states that you see on this map, as well as the province of Ontario. This webinar series was inspired by a survey we conducted at the end of last year. We asked experts across the Midwest which species they consider to be early detection species. And when we say early detection, we mean plants that are either not in the Midwest yet, but they're in neighboring regions, or plants that are here but are so far only found in really isolated pockets. But in either case, we're very concerned about their potential to spread, and we want to make sure people are aware of them. So we received feedback from every state and province in the region, and 10 plants really rose to the top of the list, and those are the ones you see listed here. So if you want to learn more about these, we did create a flyer that you can download from MIPIN's website that highlights each of these 10 species. Another resource that we have is our recently updated terrestrial and aquatic invasive species flyers. They're called our Keep a Lookout flyers. There we go. And they each cover 16 different invasive plants. So I'll put links to those publications in the chat. And just finally, we really appreciate you joining us today. And if you're in a position to do so, we invite you to consider just maybe a small donation to MIPIN today. Even $5 or $10 helps support our invasive species education efforts. So that is my introduction. I am going to go ahead and invite Robert, our guest speaker today, to share his screen. And I will give him his formal introduction. So Robert McGowan is passionate about the outdoors, and that has led him to a career in the environmental field. For the past 17 years, he's gained valuable experience while employed with the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry, Credit Valley Conservation, Trent University, and Fleming College. For the past 10 years, Robert has worked as the Aquatic Project Specialist at the Ontario Federation of Anglers and Hunters, where he's working with the Water Soldier Working Group to monitor and control invasive water soldier populations on the Trent Severn Waterway, Red Horse Lake, Black River, as well as private ponds across Ontario. So really appreciate you being with us today, Robert. And again, everyone just kind of keep an eye on the chat, and I'll be adding some additional information there.
Thank you, Michelle, and thank you everybody for having me. As Michelle said, my name is Robert McGowan. I'm the Aquatic Project Specialist at the Invading Species Awareness Program, which is housed by the Ontario Federation of Anglers and Hunters. Today, I'm just going to give you a quick overview of what water soldier is. There we go. The habitat that it likes to live in, its morphology, ecology, reproduction, and some of the control options that we've kind of moved forward with over the past 10 years to try to eradicate and manage water soldier in Ontario. So what is it? So water soldier is an invasive perennial aquatic plant that is native to Europe and Northwest Asia. The first known wild population in North America was found in the Trent River, which is in Ontario. Water soldier was used as an ornamental plant in water gardens, and which is a likely source of its introduction to the Trent River. So why is water soldier a problem? So water soldier forms dense mats of floating and submerged vegetation. It crowds out our native vegetation that results in decreased biodiversity. It has potential to alter surrounding water chemistry, which may harm phytoplankton and other aquatic organisms. Dense floating mats of water soldier can hinder recreational activities such as boating, angling, and swimming. And the sharp serrated edges of the leaves can cut swimmers and individuals who handle the water soldier plants. And you can see those sharp serrations right there on that leaf margin on the picture to the right. If you get cut with it, you know it does some pretty damage pretty quick. Okay, so what kind of habitat does it like? So the typical habitat for water soldier is slow, still or slow-moving mesoeutrophic water. It is not found in very shallow water or fast-moving water or areas where the water fluctuates due to the sinking and floating behavior of the plant. The plant is lightly rooted and prefers soft, muddy sediments. So anywhere where you're going to find your lily pads, your arrowheads, water soldier loves that kind of back bay kind of habitat. And usually it's found in about 1 to 5 meters of water. So the morphology. So water soldier appears as 2 different forms, the submerged and the emergent. So the submerged here in the middle picture and the emergent in the picture on the left. The submerged form overgrows the bottom in the littoral zone and has long, bright green, brittly, spirally twisted, mature leaves that have a serrated margin of spines. The emergent form breaches the water surface and has stiff, erect leaves and the serrated spines on the leaf margin. Both forms of water soldier produce turions and offsets, which is their main means of reproduction. In late spring, rosettes from the roots that grow into the sediment, loosely anchoring the plant. At the same time, the offsets start to form. The flowering in emergent plants occurs in about midsummer here in Ontario, but we don't see that very often. So in the beginning, in 2010, I believe, we collected a large amount of the flowers from the Trent Severn Waterway and sent them to a herbarium in Ottawa, and they didn't produce any viable seeds. So this main mean of reproduction from the water soldier plants are through those turions and offsets. So the rosette's leaves can grow up to 60 centimeters in length. They're bright green in color. The leaves are sword-shaped, rigid, brittle, and have a serrated margin of spines. The flowers are white with 3 petals. The asexual reproduction by the way of those turions and offsets, and you can see that this top right picture here, that's an offset. So that would grow directly off the rosette of the plant. And you can see this picture here has another offset right there. And that's where those offsets and turions hide, in that rosette of the plant, right at the base there, and all comes out of the same origin. So reproduction. Water soldier relies primarily on vegetative reproduction through these offsets and turions. The offsets develop directly into open rosettes, resembling a small version of the parent, and become detached by late summer. So you can see this picture in the bottom right-hand corner. This offset will now break off around this time of year, and it will start growing its own turions and offsets. And one of these mother plants here can have upwards from 5 to 10 of these offsets on it, not including the turions. So the initial response for when water soldier was detected in Ontario. So to address the serious threat that water soldier posed, an interagency group was formed in 2013 to help coordinate research, monitoring, control, and prevention strategies. An integrated management plan was drafted to help prevent new introductions of water soldier to the province and to eradicate existing populations that threaten to invade provincial, national, and binational waters. The OFH has been at the forefront of this infestation since 2008, and we've worked together with the working group that's comprised of the provincial, federal government, academia, and some of our conservation authorities. Because when water soldier first arrived, there was no clear agency responsible for addressing the aquatic invasive plants that were present in Ontario. And there was legislative gaps to address the import, sale, and possession of and transport of aquatic invasive plants such as water soldier. And a good example is that's how water soldier got into Ontario, through the plant trade. And people wanting these for their ornamental water garden ponds. So through this, the provincial government came out with the Invasive Species Strategic Plan in 2012 and took responsibility for having these, control over and responsibility over these invasive plants that are in Ontario. We had limited control options. We had no herbicide options in the early days. So there was a long hill to climb in terms of moving forward and addressing water soldier. So the integrated management plan was developed, and it was to guide our management plans and strategies for eradicating water soldier in Ontario. So the objectives were to prevent the introduction and spread of water soldier into new locations, implement early detection and rapid response actions to locate and eradicate new water soldier populations, eradicate established water soldier populations from public waters, and work with the private sector to identify and eradicate water soldier from private waters in Ontario. So that integrated management plan now is in its third transition. So right now it's being updated because it is a living document. So we build a 5-year plan on the integrated management plan. So this is what these management objectives look like right now. By the time the fall comes, they may look very different because we're at different stages. We are multiple different stages of invasions in certain areas. So these objectives are going to change. But right now we're still following these ones. So what do we do about it and how do we monitor it? So we utilize a point intercept design to sample the study area systematically. So the grid scale is 50 by 50 meters and all intercepts have unique identifiers. Each crew is equipped with a tablet and real-time GPS that shows the survey grid lines and the crew's positioning in the sample area in real time. We travel by boat along the grid lines, recording a value of 0 to 3 for water soldier value at each 50-meter grid intercept. So a value of 0 would be no water soldier, a value of 3 is a dense colony, and then 1 would be a single plant and 2 would be scattered plants. The boat driver trolls along the survey line, calling out each 50-meter intercept. If the observers are able to see the river or lake bottom, they may include any water soldier plants they see at the according value. And if not, if the visibility is the water's turbid or it's hard to see, we use a thatching rake that we throw down to bring up the aquatic vegetation from the bottom. So with that mapping, all that monitoring done, that information is sent to the GIS technician and these maps are made. So each 50 by 50 meter point intercept is now turned into a grid. And I believe this is called cringing. I'm not a GIS expert whatsoever, but from the information collected in the monitoring, these maps are built. And so you can see in 2017, we had 171 hectares of water soldier. In 2018, we brought that down to 37.5 hectares. And in 2020, we brought it down to 13.68. And COVID really kind of threw a wrench in our plans and what we usually kind of would move forward with doing. We were limited in our monitoring, and we were limited in securing the company that comes to spray from the States every year. So we had to improvise and subcontract out that spraying to some other people. And you can see in 2022, we're on the rise again. This is Lake Seymour, one part of the infestation area, but that's how kind of the data is collected and what it kind of it looks like in terms of mapping it out and building our management plan off these maps. So water soldier was first found in the Trent Severn waterway in 2008. It was also, there's a second occurrence in September 2015 in the Black River, which is a tributary off of one of our larger inland lakes, Lake Simcoe. We acted quickly. We have had a full rapid response plan, and we were very successful in eradicating water soldier from the Black River. So we had a hand pulling event and 2 herbicide treatments, one in 2015 and 2016. We haven't recorded any plants in the river since 2016, but interestingly enough, We monitor the river every year. Part of that monitoring includes eDNA work, and we are still getting positive eDNA hits from that river, but we can't physically find any plants. And the third wild occurrence was in Red Horse Lake, which is north of Kingston, Ontario. And we have been putting rapid response efforts towards that population as well. And we've seen a steady decrease every year since. We usually don't start monitoring at Red Horse Lake until about August. So hopefully we have some good news come August when we go out for our monitoring. So what I have here is a quick timeline of a cottager who owns some property on the Trent Severn Waterway. And it's just a progression of water soldier infesting or invading her waterfront property over a few years. So you can see here, you can see water soldier along the shoreline in the littoral zone. You see little patches out here. And then we move to the next year, which I believe is 2014. You can see that's starting to fill in that littoral zone and become that dense monoculture that I mentioned earlier. And here we are. The landowner had to change the perspective on the shot. So the shoreline's over here. She just wanted to document that now the populations are out past her dock. And later that year in August, you can see that the water soldier has filled in this bay completely. So it's pretty fast. It establishes very fast and spreads very quickly with those offsets and turions. It's almost exponential how fast this plant can grow and spread and establish. So I'm just going to keep you there on that slide. Just remember this because I have another slide coming up later that I'm going to refer back to this picture too. So control options. So the integrated management plan outlines all our control options from hand pulling to herbicide to mechanical harvesting to shade cloth enclosures. So we've implemented some of those over the few years and tested their efficacy. So hand pulling is one of the options that we like to use, but we're very particular on what size of the population we choose to hand pull. The water soldier is very deceptive on how much it looks like there is in the water. A few plants, a small colony, may look like it's easy to remove, maybe like 20, 30 plants, but it ends up being hundreds of plants. And you can see here in this picture on the left, I usually like to enclose all of the populations that I am hand pulling with some sort of structure, because when you are pulling these plants, as you can see all the mud on the side of the boat, it really kind of makes that water column turbid and muddy. And with water soldier being a floating plant, once that water gets muddy, you may be a vector of spread for this plant when you're removing it. So I like to always have an enclosure around my populations when I'm removing them. Usually, I don't like to start to remove anything larger than 5 meters by 5 meters. And that's going to be a couple days of work to make sure that you've gotten all those plants out of that population. Our next option is herbicide, which when we first had water soldier in Ontario, we didn't have any herbicides registered to use over water. So we had to use diquat dibromide under an emergency label extension before it was registered in 2014. When we did get it registered, as you can see, we had great success here by bringing up Solitude Lake Management, which is out of the Northeast, New York. Actually, I think it's New Jersey, Hackettowns, New Jersey. And they do a great job when they come up. They bring a few airboats and, they have the capacity to treat hundreds of hectares of aquatic plants in a day, where right now in Ontario, nobody really has built capacity to deal with an infestation of this size. So as I said, I was going to let you sit on that picture back there. So you can see how successful the diquat dibromide has been. This is that same bay we were looking at with that gentleman in his boat that was blocked in by all the water soldier. So after 2 consecutive treatments of water soldier with the diquat dibromide, we have been seeing success like this. Unfortunately, we are on a flowing system, so plants are constantly moving downstream and establishing new populations. So it's upstream down we're working, which we wasn't the strategy to begin with. We were trying to work from downstream up. So things have forced us to move in a different direction. But we are seeing success, which is great. We did trial a mechanical harvester. So for a week, we hired this mechanical harvester to remove water soldier mechanically. It worked. It got rid of some biomass. It's just very expensive to run. Mechanical harvesters move very slow. They're not the quickest moving vehicle out there on the water. And with water soldier biomass, the hopper would fill up so quickly. So most of the time spent removing this plant was transportation to the population and then transportation to offload the population. We do have a trial going with Parks Canada this year. It's Parks Canada's trial with the Truxar, which is a smaller kind of amphibious machine, because in that area in Lake Seymour, we're trying to pick up crumbs now. So we're just trying to see what's the best way to kind of remove these small isolated populations and kind of get away from herbicide, because we're in these small populations, we're not seeing the residency time of the for the herbicide that we need to be effective. So we're just trialing some other ways to see how we can move forward and clean up all the little populations that are left over. And of course, part of our job here at the Invasive Species Awareness Program is education outreach, and our clean, drain, dry messages is at the forefront of that aquatic invasive species messaging. There's a new legislation under the Invasive Species Act here in Ontario that it is mandatory that you clean and drain all mud, debris, plants and animals from your boat, and drain all your water from your boats before traveling to another water body. So this is a step in the right direction to kind of, ensure that people are taking doing their due diligence when they're out boating and traveling around Ontario, and it'll make our job easier if they do follow that, because we won't have as many new introductions or spreading of invasive species around Ontario. And that's my presentation. So if you have any questions, here's my email right here, robert_mcgowan@ofh.org. We have a program email if you want to send some questions there. And our Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook handle is at INV species. So you can follow us there. Thank you very much, guys. Oh, any questions?
Thank you so much. I don't make sure people can hear me. I don't see any questions in the chat yet. So, but we have time. So I encourage people to, any thoughts you have, any questions you have. And while people are doing that, I have a couple of questions, if that's okay.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So you talked about like enclosing the removal area when you're doing mechanical removal, so you don't end up with accidental spread. How do you do that? What kind of material do you use, and what's the process?
For the small populations I'm speaking of, I usually just use a seine net, because I'm not I don't know if you know what a seine net is for the collection of forage fish. Usually, it has two poles on each end, and I just run the boat around the population and make sure that it's not going to get out. We've also used booms when we were removing on the Black River, which was a much larger population. So we had I think it was about 600-foot boom with a 4-foot silt curtain that dropped down, and that helped prevent the spread of the plants downstream.
Oh, that's really interesting. I'm also wondering too, when you talked about the trials with the mechanical harvester, what kind of decon do you have to do with a piece of equipment like that?
Decon, so decontamination.
Yeah.
So yeah, it would be hours. Well, I personally didn't do it. We hired a gentleman out. That there's a few contractors up here that actually own their own mechanical harvesters, and it's their business. But it would be a couple hours after each day that he would have to go through and decontaminate the whole machine. And they're not small machines. So luckily, he wasn't moving the mechanical harvester every day. So he was always on the same water body.
Mm.
So it was I don't think it was as intense as it was the last day he left. It took a couple hours for him to do that.
Yeah, that sounds very strategic. Yeah, keep it in that same location as long
Yeah.
as you can. Okay, fantastic. All right. Well, I don't see any other questions. Is there anything else that you wanted to share with us, Robert? Is there anything that you wanted to touch on that you didn't have time to?
Yeah. So it's such a long period of time that we've been dealing with it. So it's kind of hard to tell that story. I think it's time to kind of revisit the storytelling part of this. And because it was so complicated at the beginning. Now we have dicot that we were using, which it was godsend at the time. But now in Ontario, we have a new product that is registered, and you may have heard of it, Procelicor. It's a product from CPRO. We worked with CPRO with Mark Hellman last year to do some on the ground work under a research authorization. And we saw great success with Procelicor on water soldier in controlled environment. So we had a private pond that we were addressing. And we saw, usually when we use dicot dibromide on water soldier, we know that's gonna be multiple treatments. So probably a 2-year treatment before we see the success that we're looking for. With this Procelicor treatment, we saw the results that we would see in the matter of weeks. So this is really, really encouraging news. And we look forward to see how it's going to work in a real world environment. So somewhere like the Bay of Quinte, where we're going to be using this product this year.
Was the Bay of Quinte the one that you showed the before and after?
No, that's the Trent Severn Waterway.
Oh, that was
So,
okay.
Yeah, the water soldier has just recently been found in the Bay of Quinte, and this was one of our main objectives, to keep the water soldier out of Lake Ontario. And we were successful for over 10 years, but unfortunately, when you have a floating plant and a floating system, it's very difficult.
Yeah, the results that you were able to show, though, with was it like starting the 2013 to 2015 was really impressive. And so that's a great start. And now you're saying you might even be able to, if these trials work in the real, not just in the controlled environment, but more broadly, then that time frame will even be reduced.
Yeah, and I really think just having more tools in our toolbox. I know that compared to a lot of the states, the Solitude Lake Management is the company that comes up. They're like, oh, you can use this product or that product and this product. I'm like, we don't have that many. We're not allowed to use those products. They're not registered here in Canada. So having just one more tool in toolbox just hopefully can help us out and keep this at bay.
Okay. Well, I'll just maybe invite you to put the slide up with your contact information one more time.
Okay.
In case anybody thinks of a question, after today and they want to get in touch with you.
Previous, right here.
There we go. We'll leave that up just for a minute in case anybody needs to capture that. We do have a question. After treatment, how long does it take for native vegetation to rebound?
Well, that's a good question. I'm not exactly sure how long, but usually I'll use one really good success story that we had from one of the areas, Percy's Reach in the Trent Severn Waterway. So we had about a 50-acre plot of water soldier, and you see how dense it is. And we treated that 2 years consecutively. And the following year, we had wild rice come up. And wild rice now covers over 70 acres of that area, which I don't know if you guys know, wild rice is native here in Ontario, and people don't like it very much, but it's really good for our water quality and our waterfowl habitat and our native species. So that was one example. Typically what we're seeing is when we get rid of water soldier, we're getting those other nuisance species come and fill the void. So our early season, the curly leaf pondweed's coming up, and later in the season, you're seeing the Eurasian water milfoil take hold there. So unfortunately, not great, but I think those species are lesser of the two evils than water soldier, because if at least you can recreate and boat and utilize the waterway with those other species there. When water soldiers present, there's nothing happening. So I hope that answers your question, but it's pretty variable. I'd say within a year or two, plants are coming back, but it's those other nuisance species that are taking foothold.
Okay. Okay. Well, don't see any other questions. So I think that we will conclude for today. I just want to again thank Robert McGowan, the Ontario Federation of Anglers and, oh, help me out, Robert. Hunters, there we go. And to our sponsor for this webinar, the Invasive Species Center. So if you need any more information, contact Robert, or you can always reach me at mippen.org. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Michelle.